lunch.
Oh God, here we go.
Correctional.
It's going to be speaking to our offenders here at the Rutherford County Correctional Work Center, and hopefully we can spread a little positivity and yeah, let's do this thing.
And what kind of speech?
This is real.
This is real.
Look it.
We're locked in.
You ready?
You literally are.
Mm-hmm.
Matt cannot
Where you
get
want me?
Hey, let's get the sign. Let's get the sign.
Get the sign.
Matt cannot leave here.
I guess I'm sleeping here tonight.
All right, so Matt, you'll be in the back of the room.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay back here. Yes, this is what it would be like staying in the prison. The cleanest one we've been in. Nice to see you, Ireland.
One female don't want to be in any type of recording.
Okay, we're just yeah, that's fine. We're doing live. Should we just?
I just need to point out who they are.
Yep.
This young man in the blue over
Okay.
here with the man bun.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
And then the white-haired lady with the glasses on.
Okay.
Up there.
Just so I'll just keep it in the middle.
Mr. Ian
Get
Bick.
them in English.
So
You can get the back.
he is. Pastor. He's got a great story to tell you guys. Very relatable to everything that you guys do. He was a participant on HBO Max's Generation Hustle. If you guys ever caught that series online, what he does is he utilizes his lived experiences to uplift and encourage others. He hosts that podcast. It's called Locked In with Ian Bick. He's had a ton of guests. The one I just saw was Mike Tyson, Chevy Chase. I mean, if you guys are older like me, you know what Chevy Chase is. Sly Stallone was on it with him, so he knows some people who know some people. He explores riveting life stories that are shared by a diverse array of individuals. He's been in prison, federal prison, so definitely can give you some good stories and that you guys can relate to. His captivating show connects with everyone, all of us, people from all walks of life, recovering addicts, law enforcement people, legal experts, mental health specialists, especially those that are weathered in traumatic experiences and failures. So please, put your hands together for Mr. Ian Bick.
I know I don't actually look like I've been to federal prison, but unfortunately I have. And funny enough, they used to all call me McLovin. And Squints from The Sandlot, if anyone's seen that movie.
Yeah.
And occasionally they would call me Justin Bieber because I have some of Justin Bieber's tattoos, and that didn't really sit right with some of the prisoners in there, and I kind of got a hard time for that. And we're going to get into that today. I have some funny and entertaining stories, and I also have a message of hope and perseverance of what I've been able to overcome and how you can turn your current situation into something that's successful. So I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut. It's about an hour and a half from New York City. That's where I live now today. And I was bullied when I was a kid. I was bullied a lot. I was called Twinkie. I was called Chubs. In fact, when I got arrested, if you ever go on a cell phone and look at my mug shot and old photos, I was almost 300 pounds. So I was a big fella. I was chunky, very unathletic, the most unathletic individual you'll ever meet. Always pick last on the basketball team, the sports teams, whatever, you name it. And so when you're bullied as a kid, you want to do everything in your power to be liked. You want to do what you can to please others so that way you're not picked on, you're not bullied. And that would get me into trouble in my later years. You see, my addiction that I would come to have was not alcohol or drugs. Depending on who you ask, there was a little gambling involved, but it was wanting to be liked. I would do everything in my power to be liked and to fit in. And so I started throwing these house parties in high school, and I became this popular whiz kid through house parties. And I convinced my parents to let me have 200 or 300 or 400 people sometimes as a sophomore in high school at my house, at my parents' house. And I would tell them there was only 50 people showing up, and you have nothing to worry about. And meanwhile, there was all these kids showing up at the house. And eventually they caught on to my antics and my lies, and they said, Ian, you can't do this anymore. So I used that budding popularity and turned it into a little bit of a business. And what I did was I rented out a local nightclub at 16 years old, and all those people that would come to my house parties, I would start charging them $10 a piece, and I would send out mass texts and pass out flyers. And I had all of these individuals show up to this nightclub in Danbury. And at 16 years old, once a month, I would make anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 in cash. All, under the table cash, and it was a business. I was creating this party promotion business. And so, ambitious Ian that wants to be liked and wants to do more, gets this idea to decide to skip college. I said, I'm not going to college, I have this budding business, I'm making all this money. I'm even starting to go to my high school dressed in a suit and tie, and I was carrying around a briefcase at 16 years old. And I had a phone that I would answer phone calls in the middle of class and tell the teacher, I gotta take this business call and just walk out. And obviously I got suspended for that, and I got detention, but I thought I was cool. And because I was so different doing these things, everyone started to gravitate towards me, and they started to like me. And they liked that I was where all the popularity and all the girls and all the parties were at. And so I want to take it a step further from this. I want to go to the next level. And the next level in the party promotion business is booking concerts, booking acts. So I start booking big rappers like Big Sean and Tyga and Steve Aoki and Chief Keef and all of these big names in the music industry before I'm 18 years old. And I do this because I'm able to raise almost $1 million from friends and family by telling them that I'm going to take their money and put it into these concerts. And I had already had success as a young 16-year-old kid doing these big events, so they trusted me. And I had every intention of booking these concerts and doing these acts. The thing I didn't plan for is that when I'm doing these deals and promising them returns on their investment, was that all of these concerts would end up losing money to a series of unfortunate events, from Chief Keef calling me the night of the show and saying he couldn't make it and losing $50,000 in one night, to the time I booked the rapper Tyga, paid $40,000 for him and ended up losing $200,000 on the show because no one showed up to the event. And in that moment, when all of these shows started to fail and I'm out all this money, 18-year-old Ian had two choices to make. Choice number one was, well, you tell everyone the truth that you lost their money and that, I'll figure out a way to pay it back and I'm sorry and we'll move forward. Or choice number two is that I could lie and I could cover it up. And I could tell them that the shows did make money, so that way I preserved everyone liking me. That I didn't fall back into the traps of being that kid that was bullied and no one liked. And obviously I picked option number two, which wasn't the right option at the time, but in my mind and in my heart, I thought that was the right option. Option number two would lead to 2 years later, when I was 19 years old, the FBI, the IRS, postal inspectors. I never even knew we had postal inspectors. They're like armed postal postmen, pretty much. Kicking down my parents' door at 5 o'clock in the morning. They sent everyone. You would have thought I was a terrorist at this point. And I'm just a 19-year-old kid in boxers, no shirt, all storming my parents' house. Local police, state police. There was 25 or 30 agents outside. They're armed, tactical vests, the whole shebang, right out of the scene of a movie. And they dragged me out, and they made me put these ugly cowboy boots on because I didn't have any shoes without laces. I had no Crocs like you guys are wearing. And I had to wear these ugly cowboy boots because I was in musical theater all 4 years of high school. Little nerdy Ian was at musical theater all 4 years, so I had these cowboy boots from Annie Get Your Gun when I performed that, which was a musical, a country musical. So they lugged me out, and of course, the way I am, I was very anti-authority. I never wanted to be wrong. I decided I'm going to trial. I'm taking the United States federal government to trial. And it was me and my attorney on one side of the room, and then on the other side of the room was the U.S. attorney, the FBI agents, all of you guys combined on one side of the room against me. And it's a very scary thought to be looking at that. And you're on trial, and you're battling the government, and this went on for nearly a month. And they had charged me with 15 federal counts of making a false statement, wire fraud, and money laundering. And by the time I went to trial, I was about 20 years old, and I had lost. I lost about half of the charges. Now during this time, I'm on bail. I still had a bail. My parents had signed for my release. It works a little bit different than the state where you don't have to physically put up money. And so I was on bail, and the craziest part about this whole thing is that while I'm on bail and while I'm on trial, I somehow managed to open up a nightclub. And I'm running one of the biggest nightclubs in Connecticut for electronic dance music while on trial, while doing all of these crazy things. And I'm going against the town officials. They're trying to shut me down. They're trying to blackmail me with making me hire ambulance services. They're doing all of these things. And in the process of that, because at this point I'm like $1 million in debt, I start borrowing from shady figures, from motorcycle clubs, from drug dealers, from cartel members, from mafia members, all of these unsavory individuals. And when you owe them money, they want their money or there's going to be repercussions. So I did the only thing I knew how to do at the time, which was take more risks. And what I would do is I'd start going out of state to the casino in New York, because in Connecticut you had to be 21 or older to gamble, and in New York you had to be 18 or older, and I was 20 at the time. So I went out of state and I'd start gambling on the electronic table, and I'd turn $500 into $20,000 in just a few hands, and I'd sit there for hours and keep playing, and I'd go back to Connecticut and pay off these unsavory figures so they didn't seriously hurt me. And what happens is that the guys that I was working with at this nightclub I owned saw an opportunity to take the club from me because I was going out of state against the conditions of my release for pretrial supervision. And what happens is they snitch me out to the FBI. And they tell the FBI what I was doing, and I was going out of state, and that this is a violation of my conditions. They filed a motion with the court. The judge revokes my bond and tells me that the party's over. It was a frontline headline, 18-year-old, 19-year-old nightclub owner goes to prison, this and that, and then now I'm thrown into prison. It was a private facility for the feds in Rhode Island. And about 30 days later, the judge sentences me to 3 years in federal prison. And out of that 3 years, I would end up doing about 28 months. Now, this is where the story gets entertaining. This is when the laughs are going to start coming, and this is when I went through one of the craziest prison sentences you would ever imagine. I showed up and was sent to the federal prison in New Jersey called Fort Dix, and it's one of the largest federal prisons in the United States of America. And it has about 5,000 inmates. There's 2,500 on one compound and 2,500 on another. And I remember going into the chow hall, the lunchroom, my first day. And I walk in, and at this point I was in the holdover facility, so the food was bad, small trays of food, it wasn't that great. And I go to this facility, and it's huge, and it reminds me of high school. There's a buffet, there's a salad bar, there's a choice of pudding and jello, there's hefty scoops of food. And I grab my tray, and I go and sit down at the only table I figured I should go to, which was the all-white table. And I go and I sit down based on what I'd seen in like Orange is the New Black and in movies like that and TV shows. And I based my whole prison experience off of watching a few episodes of Orange is the New Black. So I go and sit at this table with my tray and I start eating. And as I'm eating, one of the guys across the table bangs on the table and looks up at me and he says, "Hey, you." And I continue to eat, and he does it again. He's like, "Hey, you." And I'm turning around, I'm like, he can't possibly be talking to me. And I'm just this white, nerdy kid with the thick black glasses on, sitting there eating my meal. And when I look up, everyone's staring at me, and he's staring deadpan straight at me, like this guy wants to kill me. And what he says is, he says, "You are not allowed to sit there." And I'm like, well, what do you mean I can't sit here? And he explains to me that in order to sit there, you need to have good paperwork. And I said, well, what's good paperwork? And he explains that you can't be a snitch, you can't be a rat, you can't have cooperated, and you can't have been a sex offender. And I said, okay, great, I'm none of those things. I'm in prison for fraud, for money laundering. And he looks at me and he says, that's what they all say. And I had no idea who the they were in that conversation. I was soon about to find out. So I said to him, well, it's going to be a few days until I could get my lawyer and my attorney to send paperwork over. So can I still sit here until we get this straightened out? And he says, no, but you could sit over there. And he points to this table behind me, and I look around, and it's a bunch of old guys with the same glasses I have on, looking at me like I'm fresh prey, with their teeth out, and they're like, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And then, in that moment, you have two choices. You either, one, like in the movies and the TV shows, you get up and you start swinging and you hit the biggest guy there and you assert your authority. Or two, you get up and you sit at that table over there. Obviously, me, who had never been to prison before, looking like the way I looked at the time, I got up and sat at that table. And I realized who those individuals were. And in the federal prison, they have this word called chomo, which is child molester in federal prison. And because of the way I looked, because I was a white, nerdy kid with the glasses, and was one of the youngest federal inmates in that prison, because there's not that many individuals there for fraud at that age, they automatically categorized me as a sex offender. And that's how I would be treated my entire stay at Fort Dix. And if any of you guys know and hear how those individuals are treated, especially in a prison like that, it's not pleasant. So then a few weeks go by, and I go and see my case manager. And I'm super excited to see my case manager because growing up in school, I'm thinking counselors, case managers, they're supposed to help you. They'll set me up with a plan for success. This is going to be great. I'll be able to get out of here. I'll have a release date and everything. And I go in and I walk in, and he doesn't even acknowledge me when I walk in, and he says, just sit down and I'll be with you in a second. He's just filling out his paperwork. And about 5 minutes go by. He looks up at me, and he has glasses, and he points his glasses down, and he takes them off, and he's like, you're not going to last long here. And I look at him, and I'm like, well, what do you mean I'm not going to last long here? And he's like, you're one of them. Without even reading my paperwork, without even acknowledging who I was, or anything like that, he automatically categorized me with the chomos, the sex offenders in this prison. And that was my first experience with the case manager. As time would go on at Fort Dix, I started to move around a little too much. I wanted to be involved in the gambling. I tried to get a contraband cell phone. I bought one actually for $2,000. And I was in my bunk watching Power and Orange is the New Black on a Boost Mobile TV, Boost Mobile cell phone. And I was trying to get involved with everything. I was shooting dice. I was gambling. I was trying to run a business. And when you're a nerdy white kid like me inside this federal prison where there's guys that have been in there for murder and extortion and all this, I'm an easy target. I wasn't running with a gang. I didn't know how all these groups worked. So right away, guys approached me to try to extort me. And I remember these guys from DC, they came up to me and they pushed me in the bathroom one day. And now at Fort Dix and in most federal prisons, there's only one guard for 400 inmates. And so that guard's on the bottom floor, and this is 3 stories tall, and it's free roam. There's no locked cells. There's 12-man rooms, and there's showers and open stalls on each floor. So these guys push me into the bathroom, and they say, hey, listen, you're going to have to send money on our books via Western Union every week, and we'll protect you. We'll protect your cell phone. We'll do all of this. And I said, absolutely not. Before I can even finish the not part, they slapped my face so hard, my glasses went across the bathroom. And on social media, everyone says my cheeks are still red from that bathroom slap that day. And that was my first time encountering the feeling of trying to get extorted. And what ends up happening is, somehow, by luck, those guys end up getting set up by another inmate because they were moving around too much. Someone planted a phone on their bed and they got them out of there. a few days later, I end up getting called to the SIS office, the Private Investigators of the Federal Prison. And that's never a good thing when you're called. And I get called down there, and the head investigator has on this phone that they confiscated from someone else that was in my room, a video of me getting choked out by another one of my roommates because we were pretend wrestling, playful wrestling, on our prison cell room one day. So he automatically thought that I was in danger of my life, and they put me in protective custody, right off the bat from there. I had no idea what protective custody was, what I was getting into, what I would be labeled as in protective custody. I didn't know anything like that. And I would end up spending the next 6 months in protective custody, which in the feds is like solitary. They put individuals who are in protective custody and individuals who are there for admin or whatnot in the same cell. And it's just a small cell, 2-man bunks, and 1 toilet. And you have guys pissing in the toilet and it's spraying if you're on the bottom bunk, and you're smelling their farts and their poop, and it's just a mess in there. And sometimes the prison was so overcrowded, they would bring a mat and put a 3rd guy in that cell, and you're just in this tiny cell. And you're in there for 24 hours a day, 3 showers a week, and if you miss rec in the morning because the correctional officer doesn't bang on your door hard enough, you're not even getting out of that cell for the day, which is honestly just another cage down the hall. So I'm in solitary for all of these months, and they end up transferring me to another low-security federal prison called Danbury, which is the prison that Orange is the New Black is based on. They have a women's prison there, and then they have the men's prison alone. And I go there, and I'm like, great, this is my hometown. I'm a few minutes away from my family. Well, after about 24 hours of being on this prison yard, I got called back to the lieutenant's office. And they ask for my ID, and then when they verify it's me, they handcuff me, turn me around, and they bring me back to the SHU. And I'm like, well, why am I going back to the SHU? I sat there for another week before I found out that a prison guard reported that I had dated his cousin several years prior when I owned a nightclub, and he had lived in Danbury, and he had been to my house before with his cousin, who I had dated. And so they locked me in the SHU for a conflict of interest because they had to remove me from the yard. And so that way he would be able to still work on the prison yard, and I had to stay in the SHU. I would stay there for like another 3 or 4 months. And altogether, I'm probably in the SHU solitary for 7 or 8 months by now. And my parents are calling every day, my attorney's calling every day. We even had a state senator call and say, what is going on? They eventually send me, they said they're going to transport me to a camp now. My points have dropped. I'm about 2 years into my sentence, and they said they're going to send me to a federal prison camp, which is where I wanted to be at all along. That's what you see in the TV shows and the movies. Club Fed is what they call it, with the basketball courts and the bocce ball courts, and where all the celebrities go, and you know, guys are eating the fast food and this and that. And they said, great, we're transferring you over there. And on the day they were transporting me, they had me all chained and shackled, and I go on the bus, and it's a bus ride to the airport, where there's another bus to take you to the camp, and there's another bus that takes you to Con Air, the plane, where they had a bunch of armed U.S. Marshals surrounding it, and all the guys are chained and shackled, waddling their way up the staircase. And the plane looks like it's been from the 1970s, duct taped. Thing looks like it's going to fall out of the sky. Well, they don't put me on the bus to the camp. They end up bringing me on the plane. And I'm yelling in the middle of the line, I think you guys got the wrong guy. I'm not supposed to be on this plane. That's my ride over there. And I end up going on this plane, and when you're in transit on the plane, there's no classification. You could be with guys that have murdered 10 people, or this or that. And I'm in between these 2 guys, one guy claiming he was a mafia hitman, another guy, a big leader at the cartel, and they're looking at me, asking me what I'm there for, thinking I'm a chomo too. And they're explaining how they have a life sentence, or they have 20 years or 30 years, this and that. And I'm there looking up at them saying, I'm just here for 3 years for fraud. And I'm stuck on this plane. Well, the feds will put you when they're not happy with you through this thing called diesel therapy. And they shipped me to Oklahoma City, the airport transportation unit for federal prison, where they have literally an airport terminal hooked up to a jail. They sent me there, they sent me to Chicago, they sent me all over. It took me a month and a half to get to my designation. with none of my commissary items, with nothing, always changing jumpsuits and uniforms. And they end up sending me to this place called Oxford, Wisconsin. It was a prison camp that had a camp and a medium, and obviously they sent me to the camp. And when I got to the camp, this is about almost 2 years, a little over 2 years into my sentence, I'm like, okay, this is it, this is great. They had the bocce ball courts, the tennis courts, the volleyball courts with the sand. They had a dog program. There was no fence. They would literally, the inmates there was 120 inmates, they would have me run through the woods to pick up bags. They would say, hey, McLovin, go get this bag from our people. And I would run through the woods and bring back a big knapsack full of McDonald's and sushi and Mexican and pizza and cell phones. And we would sell cell phones and we would do all this stuff. It was ran like a madhouse. And there was only one guard who didn't care. It was during the government shutdown, and it was very relaxed. And everything was great there until I got a job in the kitchen. And I was very passionate about working in this kitchen because I came from a culinary background. My dad's a chef, so they put me in the bakery. And in prison, that's one of the highest paid jobs because not only do you get your salary from the prison, but you can hustle. Onions, peppers, bakery items. I used to smuggle out blocks of Philadelphia cream cheese so I could make non-baked cheesecakes and sell them for $2 a slice. I was always hustling. And they would always give me the items because the guards would never stop to search me because I was just a young white kid that knew nothing better. And I would go out there with just like mounds of milk and eggs and everything, and we would cook things up. We made the cold nachos. We made the good pizza. I tried mackerel, which is actually pretty good on some of these items in prison. And we were living good. And then what ends up happening is that one morning, because I was on the morning shift, me and my bunkmate were both in the bakers, and he was the head baker, and he doesn't show up to work that morning. And the prison guard that woke us up that day said, oh, your bunkmate had a call out today, he didn't need to be here. And so it's just me and him, me and this correctional officer. And I'm thinking, all right, this is normal, whatever, and it's 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and I'm scooping muffin mix. Into the tray, they had the pre-made muffin mix. And I'm standing there, I'm right here scooping it, and this officer's right here. I'm scooping it, we're having a casual conversation, and I thought me and this guy got along. It's a male guard, tall, skinny guy, always wears his pants held high. And I'm thinking, you know, we were okay. He'd always ask me how my day was. He let me get extra portions, skip the line, bring back those Philadelphia blocks of cream cheese. Things are going on. It's a normal morning. Well, everything was normal until I start feeling something on my elbow. And it's a little rub like this. And I look to the right, and he pulls his hand back. I'm like, okay, maybe I had something on me, like some flour, and keep in mind I'm in the green khakis, short sleeve shirt, khaki pants, and the boots. So my skin's exposed right there. And I go back to scooping the muffin mix. Well, a couple minutes go by, and the rub happens again, only this time it's a little longer. And then my cheeks are redder than ever in this moment. I'm just staring straight ahead. I'm like, oh man, this cannot be happening. I mean, they tell you in the movies and in TV shows, like, don't drop the soap and this and that and this, and you would never expect in your life that this would ever come from a correctional officer. So that rubbing continues, and then it goes to my thigh, and then it goes to my butt, and it's a pattern of the elbow, the thigh, and the butt for like a few minutes. And this is the most awkward, embarrassing thing in my life. I'm like, why couldn't this have been a woman? Like, why has it got to be a male prison guard? And so I'm standing there, and then, you know, he doesn't say anything, which is the creepy part. He's just breathing heavily while this is going on. And now, in the prison, there's no cameras. So in that moment, I'm thinking, well, if I go and swing on this guy, it's my word against his. And in these situations, the correctional officer is always in the right. And it's never the inmate who's in the right in this moment. And there was no witnesses. So that carries on. I went back to my cellmate, and we talked to other individuals at the camp, and we said, should we report this? And we deemed we're not going to report it at this time because we had a good thing going. We had good hustles. Maybe we could use this guy to get in more contraband, or maybe it was just a one-time thing. Well, a couple weeks later, I go into the walk-in refrigerator at the kitchen. And normally the correctional officers because it's always locked, because that's where the good stuff is, all the good product, and they don't want us stealing it, would unlock it and just stand outside the door because they're very small. This guy unlocks it, comes into the walk-in, and shuts the door behind him. And I'm sitting there with this tray of frozen cookie dough, thinking, how on earth am I going to make it out of this walk-in cooler or freezer? This man forced me to walk past him in between the door while I'm holding this tray, so that way my butt went up against his groin area, out of the fridge and out of the freezer. That was my final straw, and we ended up reporting it. We reported it to the prison. They removed him from the compound. They decided they weren't going to send me to the SHU because he could go work at the Medium. And I thought, great, this is going to be a huge payday, sexual assault in the prison. That guy's going to get fired, arrested, it's going to make the news, whatever. To this day, I have no idea what happened to that man. I've never been updated on the case. I don't even know if they did a proper investigation. I wrote to my judge, and I told the judge what exactly happened, so it's documented. He ordered immediately the U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate it, and they reported back saying, oh, the prison system is investigating it, so everything's covered. And the court system, the way it's set up, believed that, and that was the end of that. And when I got out of prison eventually the next year, and I told my attorney about this, he said it's one of those things where it's your word versus his word, and it's never going to add up, and you're never going to get anywhere with it. So that was the end of my prison stay. January 2019, I ended up getting out of prison, and I got sent to the halfway house. And I thought the halfway house was going to be great for reentry. I thought I was going to be able to get a job. Everything was going to be good. I could start working. On my first night there, I realized that prison is better than these halfway houses that were in Connecticut. The food was worse. They were giving skimpy trays. You couldn't get a visit. You could barely get a phone call. You were not allowed to have smartphones, where the state guys could have smartphones, but the feds had to have flip phones. It was such a terrible environment that guys would literally purposely come back to the halfway house with dirty urine or try to get an escape charge just so the marshals would pick them back up and bring them back to prison, because the halfway house was not an enjoyable setting. During this period of time, I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I going to do with my life now? I'm, 24 years old, 23 years old. I want to get back into the nightclub business. And I want to start a club again. I want to get back into concerts. That's what I was passionate about. I read all these books in prison. When you're in solitary in the SHU, all you can do is read a book. And I took all these notes, and I had this elaborate plan to be like the next Wolf of Wall Street, sharing my story about how I owned a nightclub at 18 and everything like that. And I thought that was going to give me all this success. And, I ended up getting like an HBO Max documentary and a Vice documentary, but it didn't really lead me anywhere. It didn't blow up. HBO wasn't that big at the time for their new streaming site when this came out years ago. And the Vice one did a few million views on YouTube, but no, it didn't go anywhere seriously. So I ended up working at Whole Foods. And I went into Whole Foods because that was a place that hired me during my trial, where I applied to literally 100 places, and not even Red Lobster would take me as a dishwasher for $9 an hour. So I went back to Whole Foods when I got out, and they gave me $15 an hour to work the hot bar. And I started working the hot bar, just hustling, and obviously, when you get out of prison and you're in a small town, your coworkers and other staff members are pointing at you like, hey, that's the guy that went to prison, and they're talking about it, and I had the ankle monitor on because I was on house arrest for the first year, and I remember I didn't wear a pair of shorts that whole first year because I was so embarrassed by prison, by house arrest, by my situation. But I just put my head down, I worked hard, and my goal was to rise to the ranks at Whole Foods by my work ethic, and that's what I accomplished. Within 3 years, I went from making $15 an hour to $33 an hour, plus overtime, which was going to equal over $100,000 before I would end up quitting, all from working hard in prepared foods. And the thing about prepared foods is no one wants to work in the kitchen. Everyone wants an easy bag job or whole body or whatever, the easy job. So if you go into Whole Foods and you go to prepared foods and you're hungry and you want to learn and you want to move up, and you're someone that has a record, it was a great experience to move up those ranks and get to where I wanted to be. It gave me new credit. It gave me a dog. It gave me a car. It gave me my own apartment. it helped me rebuild my life. Until 3 or 4 years later, in 2022, that passionate, entrepreneurial Ian that was inside of me, that was kind of put away by the prison system and was put away by re-entering society, started to emerge, and I started thinking to myself, there has to be more for this out there for me. There's got to be more than just, working at Whole Foods. Because in the years getting out of prison, everyone says you can only work this certain job, or you can only go to this school, or you can only do this, you can only get this apartment, you can only open this credit card. I think probation sometimes is way worse than the prison system itself, or even when you're on pretrial. And that's a whole nother topic of debate with how you're treated when you're on pretrial and when you're on probation, and even in the system in general. So I had these feelings inside of me, and I expressed it to one of my close friends. His name's Mike, who was the videographer at the club. And at this point, this is 2022, we're through the pandemic, TikTok's exploded, there's all these content creators out there. And he encourages me to start sharing my story on social media. He says, start making videos. Videos are the way to share your story and get it out there to the world. And so I sit down on my iPhone, and every day I start telling a story from when I owned the nightclub. How I booked Tyga, how Chief Keef owes me this money, how I lost this amount, all of these stories from the nightclub business. And they started, doing 1,000 views, 2,000 views, a few hundred views. And then on like the 6th video or 7th video, I end up getting COVID. And I'm in bed, and I feel like I'm dying, and I'm all stuffy, and I can't breathe, and I have a high fever, and I call him and I say, Mike, I can't make this video today. I don't feel good. I feel like I'm dying. And he says, Ian, you made it this far. You have to be consistent if you're going to do this. So I get up in my bed and I turn on the lights, and it's even a little bit darker, and I'm sitting there with a bushy set of hair because I hadn't gotten a haircut. My cheeks are redder than ever because I have a fever. And I make a video, only this time I decide, for the first time ever in my life, to talk about my prison experience. And I make that video for 1.5 minutes about why I was sent to solitary and how they treat you in solitary and federal prison. About the 3 showers, and about the rec, and about how much little food you can eat, and how I lost over 100 pounds just sitting in solitary for all those months. That video ends up doing 1.5 million views on TikTok within the first 24 hours. A few days later, a producer from MTV reaches out, and they said, Ian, we want to cast you in a dating show. And I'm like, great, a felon in a dating show, this sounds lovely, where are you sending me? And they said, they're going to send me to Europe. And at that point, I had just gotten my passport back from the court. I was just finished probation. The stars are aligning, everything's great, this is my destiny, this is my purpose. So I quit my job immediately, I threw away the $100K a year job, and I said, I'm going to do this dating show. And this is going to elevate me to the level of success that I wanted. Well, a few days later, the casting director ends up ghosting me, and I never hear from that casting director again. So I was too prideful to end up asking for my job back, so I had no choice but to hit the ground running and focus on content creation. And what I did was, for 3 to 5 times a day, I sat in my car on just my iPhone, no equipment, no money. I lived off my credit cards for a few months and just made content about prison. All of those traumatic stories about how the guard tried to sexually assault me, and getting extorted, and paying for protection, and spending time in solitary, and how the food was, and all the unique things we did, and how we smuggled in phones, and every story that I had from my time in the federal prison system would turn into my secret weapon, would turn into my secret asset, and would give me 100,000 followers across my platforms in just a matter of months, solely from sharing my story about prison. After a few months, I have about 100,000 followers on TikTok, 100,000 followers on Facebook, a few thousand followers on YouTube, and a few thousand followers on Instagram, and I'm starting to think, I can't sit here and share my story forever. And at the time, I started to realize that there's this whole world of content creators, not the Kim Kardashians, not the models, not all of that, but content creators that have been solely to prison. They're called prison TikTokers and prison YouTubers. And these individuals have hundreds of thousands and millions of followers, and they're making $20,000 to $30,000 a month. This is all a genre. And these guys have no in some cases high school diploma. They have no college degree. These are individuals who society has kicked to the bottom of the barrel and said you won't be anything because you went to prison, because you have a record. And these guys have bigger followings than the sexy models with the 8-packs and the women with the nice bodies on Instagram. These guys are doing real things with their life and they're making change. So I decided, well, hey, how do you weaponize this? How do you take this to the next level? Because all these guys are using webcams and they're using phones. How do you modernize this? So I decided to come up with a podcast, Locked In with Ian Bick, where I'll interview these individuals in a professional setting, and I'll hear their stories. And I'll focus on their, childhood, their middle, their end, why they went to prison, how they got out of prison, how they turned their lives around. And I utilized their following to help me build a little bit of my following. And I started to get some traction. News organizations started covering my story, like No Jumper, that Adam 22 runs, did a big piece on how I paid for protection in prison, and that gave me a little bit of publicity. But you know what really changed my life? Was April last year, a few months into the podcast, was when I started to move away from the big prison TikTokers and the big prison YouTubers who had followings. And I started to interview just your average people, individuals with no social media platform, individuals who had just gotten out of prison who saw my interviews and trusted me to share their story. And I would take these individuals and I would fly them to my studio and I would just talk to them about how they grew up, about what their family was like, how they got into addiction, how they got arrested. All of these stories that the media who publishes articles of individuals like us never covers. Because when you get arrested, there's no backstory of who you are, what your family was like, what your conditions were, or anything like that. They just go with the crime that put you into that arrest or in that position or into that prison. And then when you get out, there's rarely in any cases any article that says, this person completed this with honors, and this person has changed their life, and this person has done all of that. So I started to focus on the individuals that were just normal human beings with no following and no clout. And those stories began to start going viral. Just individuals like you and me that would share their story for hours and trust me would do hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube and millions of views on their clips. And that's when I realized what my purpose in life was to take away the power from the individuals in the world that say that individuals who have been incarcerated, like me, like yourselves, and they tell those individuals that they can't be anything in life after prison, that they have to work this specific job, and that they have to be outlined by these specific set of rules. We're taking that power away from those individuals by showing us and them how powerful our stories are. Every single one of you guys in this room today has a story. There's a reason why you're here. And don't ever forget how powerful that story is. You're one step away from picking up a phone when you get out and sharing your story. And I promise you that that story will take you places that no employer, that anyone in this world who says you can't, or restricts you by these guidelines can ever give you. So that's my message to you guys. Thank you guys for having me speak today. If you guys have any questions, I'm here for you. Thank you.
I know somebody in this group has a question.
Yeah.
Alright, so I see your videos online, like, a lot of people, how do you deal with all the hate, you know what I mean?
That's a great
A lot of
question.
people hate because, like, they say, like, a lot of stuff on the podcast. Like,
Yeah, no, that's definitely an acceptable question. So there's two categories to this. So one, with me, I always used to be obsessed with the comments, and starting early out, they really affected me mentally. And I struggled with that. And now I get so many, it's just, you need the comments to kind of fuel the video's growth. You need the hates. Without the hates, there's no success. But in regards to the actual content of the videos, my job as an interviewer and as a journalist at this point is to share the person's story, and it's the audience job, the commenters, the viewers who listen, to see if that person's being honest or not, and to kind of debunk that. And as I continue to grow, because what I've learned is that everyone's experience is different. I mean, what I went through could be 100% different than what you went through. And what I've realized too in the criminal justice system is if you take 10 people that have been in the system and ask them the same question, each one's going to have an entirely different answer. So with my platform, the best I can do is give these individuals to uninterruptedly tell their stories and get their message and let the world decide if this individual is telling the truth or not.
I had a question.
Yeah.
A couple of the females over here want to know what's your network.
My network?
Online it says 13 million, but don't believe
If
it.
you Google it, it says there's something crazy, but it's not that. So, I mean, financially, I'm very open about it. I mean, I owe $400,000 in restitution right now. I pay $1,000 a month towards that. I live very, not lavishly, like some other content creators. I just have a studio apartment that's $1,600 a month. I have a car payment. I have a studio that I pay for. I have employees. I have vendors. And I don't really have necessarily assets. I don't own a home, but I'm paying my bills. And at this point, when you're 18 and you go from owing all this money and can't, like I owned a nightclub and I couldn't afford the bills. I would do crazy things like put wood in front of the electrical meter so they didn't turn it off. I would do all these crazy things. I'd owe vendors money. So to me, success isn't how big a mansion is or how big fancy my car is. I'm happy with just paying my bills on time every month and having money to eat and spend time with friends and family. Because I'm a workaholic. I'm always working. And I'll always get questions like, do you ever stop? And I love what I do and I'm passionate about it. So to me, it's not necessarily work. And so, you know, the money and all of that will come eventually, but my goal is just to stay focused on my purpose and to pay off the restitution, and then we'll see where life takes me. Yeah.
Do you ever look at this thing and like I might be influenced and people like, okay, because kids nowadays they just look at it like bad things and be like, oh, I'm gonna just pull it off. They say they want to tell a story, but they don't do the picture. You know, and then they want to go with it so they can have a story to tell. Kids might look at your story and be like, man, I want to do stuff like that too. You know? Have you ever look at it like that?
I think when you look at the full interview as a whole, and you see the pain in these individuals' eyes of what they went through, and share their most vulnerable experiences, like I've had grown men come on my podcast and share how they've been raped in prison by other inmates. And when you share those moments, I don't know anyone in this world that would want to go through what they went through just to have that story. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I guess anything's possible, but I think when you look at the message, because in every episode, it's always about the success. And every episode, we always close with how that person's turned their life around. So it's a message of positivity in all of our episodes and motivational. You had a question first, right? Yeah.
So, like, I guess when somebody gets out, how would they go about if they wanted to be interviewed, or do you choose the people that you interview, or do they reach out to you?
So right now with my platform, we have a website. It's just ianbick.com, where you could literally just fill out a form, and then it goes to my assistant, and we schedule you. We're very open. We're even mobile now on the show too. We're going to be interviewing the superintendent today.
It's going to be the most boring interview.
Interview, and now we can travel too. And I put out 3 episodes a week because there's so many stories. Right now I have like 400 people on this list, and we're continuously interviewing people. Yesterday we interviewed Kim Kardashian's co-host of her podcast on the show, and all of these celebrities are starting to get involved. Meeting Mike Tyson and Sylvester Stallone, and I hang out with Chevy Chase every couple weeks, and we go to dinner and whatnot, and that's all because I went to prison. So we're starting a whole movement behind this. You have a question?
How was the interview with Mike Tyson?
So I didn't physically interview Mike, but I got to hang out with him. He has a weed company now, and I got to go to his launch party in the city.
Yeah.
And the first thing he said to me was, he looks at me and he has a joint in his hand. He said, "You look like a smart motherfucker." And but yeah, Mike's a great guy. I always rock his merch, the Tyson 2.0 brand, and he's a really good dude. Yeah, the Mike Tyson vapes and whatnot. Oh, and Jake Paul, Mike Tyson all the day. Anyone else? Yeah.
How was the week? Did you smoke it?
So I don't personally smoke, but I'll do edibles. I like edibles. They help me sleep at night. And I like, they're shaped like an ear. Literally my ear right here. Yeah, and on the hoodie, they have like an ear that's like half bitten off or whatever on the hoodie. So it's really cool. You gotta check it out. He's created a great brand from that situation, you know? You gotta respect that. It's really cool. You have something?
Do you got words of wisdom for the people that actually leave jail? You got some words for them?
That leave or?
Yeah, like, one day these people will leave, so do you have like words of wisdom to give them, so they won't come back?
Yeah, I would say, you know, when you get out, really take some time to figure out and reflect on what your next few years look like and where you want to be and what your passion is and where you see yourself, whether that's a family, a job, or a career. And it's not going to be necessarily the day you get out of prison that you figure all this out. For me, it took me 4 years to figure out what my purpose was and what exactly I wanted to do. And I thought it was Whole Foods, and I really loved it, and they created a new life for me. But then when I found out there was something more out there for me and on my journey, and everyone has a different journey, that's when it hit me. But I would say, you know, when you get out, just find something right away that can keep you on track, like a job. Like to me, Whole Foods was everything. I dedicated that. And then I started working on my personal life. I went to the gym every day. I found a girlfriend. I went on Tinder. I did all that. I experienced that. The things that we dream about when we're in jail and we're in prison and we want, I made a bucket list and I checked those things off my bucket list. Maybe it's you find yourself a pet or a dog or whatever. Just find something that keeps you grounded and build up from there. And find a few good people that will help you pick you back up when you have those days where you feel like going down that bad path again. Because we all have those days. But what matters is that you don't choose that path and you keep going forward.
Do you still gamble?
Me? No, I do not gamble anymore. I stopped gambling over a year and a half ago now. I did like a little sports betting back in the day. Nothing major, I didn't really lose. But me personally, what I equate that to, and I'm sure those who have suffered from addiction and any other type of addiction before, I don't like that feeling of when you lose. Like that high when you're winning is great, but when you lose, that's what equates to me. That's that trauma that, you know, it reinvigorates my soul where I'm like, I do never want to feel that again. So that's so important that I never feel that again by not gambling. I don't want to risk anything I'm building by making a bet where that'll just set me back. Yeah.
Do you or have you had kids yet? How do you think it's going to affect them? Like, or in a good, bad way?
I don't have kids, but I want kids for sure. That's something I always ask my guests on the show, what they think of their kids viewing these interviews. And it's their legacy. Like YouTube and the world has created this thing where you could see someone's whole life story on YouTube and that lives for generations. Like that will always be there. These interviews I'm conducting with people. And to me, that's fascinating that it'll just always be there. And, you know, I'm going to be very open with my kids, and I'm also going to let my kids choose their own path the same way my parents did for me. I'm not going to force them to go down a certain way. Yeah.
How was your Tinder experience? You have such a big platform to live up to. Like, is it easy putting yourself out there on Tinder and picking up chicks today? Being that you have such a high success level with locked in.
Yeah.
And
So
prior clients, you know what I mean?
it's actually funny. I remember being on POF when I was in prison on the phone. Guys would literally hustle people on Tinder and POF and stuff, and they would. It's so funny. They would set up like the voice calls and the FaceTimes with like 10 different women in the day to make money and whatnot. But in regards to my experience, when I got out, I had a new body. I had lost weight. I was working out, and I got right on Tinder, and I started to get matches from people who would literally, their opening line would be, hey, my professor just presented about you in my class. And that would be like their opening line. And you would see a lot of people, like as time went on, that when like HBO went on and did my story and whatnot, they were more interested in the clout that comes with it or the attention than interested in actually getting to know who I was as a person. And then I ended up being in a relationship for like a year and I stopped doing that. Now I don't use it at all. I think Instagram is the best dating tool there is in America because you can see more about a person than Tinder ever will. And these dating sites, the competition. Instagram's not. You know, Tinder, you're constantly swiping and messaging and this and that. So Instagram, just find someone you think is attractive or you like and shoot your shot. Because I guarantee you, more than likely than not, people aren't doing that. So just talk to them. The what?
I find all the dating apps a scam.
Yeah, they're a scam. Amen to that right there. Yeah.
Are you still trying to get your money from Chief Keef?
Oh, so Chief Keef, you know, and owes me probably about $40,000, like with losses and stuff. And we tried to sue him, but you know, growing up, everyone's like, oh, sue, 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 and it's so hard to sue and pricely to get a lawsuit going. So no, that hatchet buried. But I did make a TikTok about that went viral, so I got a little bit of money off of that. So that went towards it.
Also, do you have anything like to say for people like ambitious or whatever?
I would say, you know, just find something that you can gear that ambition to. What got me into trouble is that I always had this unguided ambition. All this ambition in the world, but I had nothing to properly channel and direct it into. And what I would do is I'd put it into the club, but I didn't have the proper guidance on how to run that club. So I made all these mistakes because my ambition would just bulldoze me through all these unethical decisions. So I would just find something that you're interested in and apply all that ambition into that, and make sure you ask for help along the way. And there's so many tools in today's world. YouTube, for example, is a great search engine. TikTok is a great search engine to figure out how to do things. So if you're curious about maybe getting into content creation or technology or whatever, there's this whole plethora of information out there for individuals to learn about things without having to pay for a 4-year degree or anything like that.
I got one.
Yeah.
So I got a story that, it's a dude, myself, who was jacking off. You think that's a good story to tell, no? So I told it to one of my, guys in college, and they said, you should tell this story. It will go off. And don't crack it up, laugh.
Yeah. No, definitely. People tell that, you know what stories they tell about all the time, that they call them snipers, where guys are doing that to the female correctional officers. So we hear about that all the time. But you'd be surprised in this business that the stories you would never find interesting could be the most viral stories ever. Yeah. Yeah.
With some good words, what can you say to us so we can keep our head up and pursue our dreams?
To me, my biggest thing is just never give up. And I know that's very cliche, but when I focus on something and I have a goal, I just never, ever, ever give up. Like there's days where I don't want to get up and do an interview. Yesterday I gave a talk at a conference and I had to do 3 interviews and I was exhausted, mentally drained, and I just wanted to go back to my hotel room and go to sleep. But I'm on a mission and I'm on a journey and I have my purpose, and I had to do those interviews and I had to show up and be there. And you know, I think when you have a family, that's a great motivation. You know, showing up for your kids, showing up for your family, or showing up for yourself, knowing I want to be, you know, this certain weight, so I'm going to go to the gym every day, or I want to have this much financial success, so I'm going to work at this job and spend this amount of money. You know, just find yourself a routine and stick with that. And prison, jail, that's the best way to build a routine and stick to that. I remember when I was in prison, I stuck to a very strict routine and I followed that with me throughout the door and into later years too. Yeah.
So you do a lot of podcasts and interviews and stuff like that, but how often do you like speak out in groups like this and go from like place to place and speak as a group, I guess?
Well, that's a great question, and I really have to give a lot of credit to Superintendent Cope over there, because you'd be surprised with how many people in his position in this country do not let individuals like myself into the prisons to share experiences openly and honestly, which is probably another reason why I've had success on social media, because I don't edit my podcast. I share the truth about what goes on in the system and how we were treated. So individuals like that man over there are who are going to change the world by letting individuals like myself go to speak. Right now, I mean, last year was my first year ever doing this. I did 3 talks last year. This is my second one this year, and I'm open. Like, I don't charge. Anyone that wants me to speak at their jail, at their prison, anywhere, I will show up for them, and I will speak in front of them. I don't get paid for that. I know there's some people that make thousands of dollars in speakers fees doing that. I don't do that. At the minimum, I'll ask for is like travel covered, but other than that, I know my story's powerful, and I want to inspire individuals to share their story too, because those stories are what's going to change the world.
We did give Ian and Matt a sack lunch, though.
My friend Matt over here has never been in prison or jail, so he's getting the full experience today. We're hoping we can pepper spray him too.
Oh, we can make that happen.
He got the sack lunch that I ate on multiple bus trips. You know, the bologna and cheese and the chips and eating it. We might have to handcuff him so he gets that experience. But yeah, yeah, what do you have?
I got a question for your buddy Matt here. Being that you have a net worth of 13 million, what was it like?
Not my net worth. That's his. You look up my name, you won't find anything.
What was your experience with the sack, the peanut butter? And
I didn't even eat it yet. I'm like building up suspense. I'll let you know though. I'll let you know. I had some of the cookies, the vanilla cookies. They were good. Yeah.
I'm curious, you started the talk with how your addiction, which was wanting people to like you, really led you down this path. What advice can you give us to combat that?
With the actual wanting people to like me part?
Yeah, because that seems like that's what started it, right?
Yeah, so what I found, and that's a great question, is that never goes away. Like that internal part, whether you're addicted to drugs or you're addicted to what I was addicted to or addicted to gambling or whatever, there's always that feeling of wanting that inside of you. And I think it's so important, and in my case, I just found something to channel that into in a positive way. So I still get that kind of addiction of wanting to be liked and, you know, popular with what I do now, only now it's not necessarily in a negative way. It just comes naturally with what my purpose is. I don't make a video to get views. I don't do things that might be outrageous to get a view, which is what I might have done back in the day. Now I just know who I am as a person and what my mission is and produce content around that. And that popularity and that wanting to be liked automatically comes with that because I'm on my mission, and that's what they kind of go hand in hand. So it's not like I could sit here honestly and say, oh, I don't care about not being liked or being popular, because that's a huge part of my business. You know, that's what pays the bills, and that's a part of that, and that never goes away. It's just so important to make sure that you stay in the straight line and don't let that go into a negative way. Because you could very easily use a platform like mine and do harm with it. And I think that's where those early days of wanting to be popular and wanting to do, like maybe, you know, there's been temptations to go back into the nightclub business and go back into promoting. And that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. It's too high risk, and it's just not what I want to be doing anymore. And I think that's where the growth and the maturity comes along the way. So I hope that answered the question.
That's great.
Yeah.
How big of a hit financially will you take if they shut TikTok down?
I really hope they don't shut TikTok down. But so to me, TikTok only makes up, honestly, about a fraction of my income. I look at everything like a pie.
Yeah.
You get a little bit on YouTube, a little bit on TikTok, a little bit on Snapchat, a little bit on Instagram, a little bit in ads and sponsors. To me, TikTok, if they take it away, I don't take a hit financially, I take a hit from my voice being silenced.
Yeah.
TikTok has this insane algorithm where if you got out of prison today and you made a TikTok, it will do 10 times more views than if you made an Instagram today and a new account, which will get 0 views, negative views. TikTok has this amazing algorithm that just pushes it out there to the audience, and it helps you build and it helps you go viral. And I use those, I put my clips on my TikTok, which lead into the stories, the full interviews. So that would be like the biggest thing that it would take away from me, which is why I really hope they don't ban TikTok. Anyone got anything else for me?
Oh, me?
Well, what do you got?
No, I was just gonna say, if you throw a lot of your time into work, do you ever get tired of being around people, and like, how do you go about your view time when you do get tired of being around people?
That's a great question, because I feel that like all the time. I like to be alone a lot, and maybe that came from prison, you know. I don't necessarily like talking to people so much. Like, I love this. I love talking to you guys, and I love doing these presentations, but sometimes when all you're doing is talking to people, sometimes you just want to be alone. And what I found is just finding a few people that you want to spend your time with in your free time, and kind of having that ability to say, okay, I'm working these hours. I make a to-do list every week. I keep a section in my notes I'm gonna do this, this, and that. So on these days, I could spend this time with these individuals that I care and I love and that are important to me. And that's kind of like kept me grounded. And also, when you're an entrepreneur and you're doing stuff, like Matt's my best friend. Matt's been my best friend since the club days. And if you asked me back then if he would be here today, I would say no way. But that man stuck with me all the way, and he's been a huge supporter, and now he's working with me. So that's someone like I always want around me. I've never felt a moment where I don't want him around me. So I think when you have sometimes toxic people in your life, you kind of get that feeling, and those kind of weed themselves out when you're on your mission and on your purpose and you're growing. Yeah.
This is for Mr. Matt. Be careful with that cheese on that salad.
Should I take it off or what?
Take it off.
I gotta get the full experience. I'll do a couple bites and then I'll pull it off. Yeah. I need that.
All right, Miss Jasmine has a question.
I have, as the case manager for this facility, I do wonder, while you were in those facilities that you were at, did you take any programming like MRT, anger management, counseling, therapy?
So the program, when I first got to prison, I wasn't allowed to do programs in the beginning because they labeled me as not having a GED, which I did have my diploma, but they couldn't track it. So they made me go to the classes, and if you don't go to the classes, you'd be penalized. So there was no time for me to do programming. And then they stuck me in a some type of substance abuse program that was mandated within the feds or whatnot. And then I was never out of prison long enough to actually enjoy the other programs, but I will say that when Trump passed that new act in 2020, that gave a lot more encouragement to guys to get incentives for programming. And I know there are a lot of good programs out there, but me personally, in my experience, the system failed me in that sense that there wasn't the right programs and energy and hunger to kind of like quench my thirst for entrepreneurship.
Well, Ian, after we're finished, Miss Jasmine would like to counsel you.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm also a big proponent for mental health. I did a year of therapy. It was court ordered, but I went, and I got stuck with this 80-year-old woman who I ended up really coming to love, and I never went back to therapy when she retired after that because I was so connected and trusted her. And it took me a while to trust her, but when I found myself trusting her, I was like, this is great. And that helped me doing that for the year. So I would encourage, you know, men and women to get that mental health treatment because mental health is very important. Yeah.
So would you say your counselor, was that really, is that what really helped you open up for doing your podcast?
The counselor?
Yeah, the counselor.
No, I think what happened was there was just a bunch of pieces along the way. My whole story from owning a nightclub prepared me for this position. You know, even going back to the days of musical theater and performing on stage. Because this is a job where you have to speak in front of people. And I think every part of my life, when you look back on it, was just a preparation for this. And it just took life or my journey to figure out how to put all the pieces together. And that's what prepared me and made me who I am today. Yeah.
With your audience growing, do you plan on taking it overseas or just staying in the United States? I know you own the nightclub and stuff, so do you have potential business overseas?
I'm not really into too much business. Like, I don't do stocks, I don't do real estate or anything. I just like do what I do and know how to do and not kind of step outside of that. But I'd love to interview people that have been incarcerated outside of the country. And we have a lot of requests. I just don't personally do Zoom interviews. I think that goes against the integrity of the production. But now that we're equipped to travel, we have it figured out down to a science where we can go literally anywhere in the world with just 3 pieces of luggage and me and Matt, and so we're going to be banging out a lot of interviews and a lot of cool parties. Yeah.
I have another one. What are these Justin Bieber tattoos that you were talking about?
I got this owl right here. You guys are going to laugh at this, but I had to get my prison nickname tatted on me, so I got McLovin right here. I could not be where I'm at and not get that tattoo. I go to this arbitrary tattoo, Mikey D and Danbury. I never got a prison tattoo. Everyone always.
That's what we were wondering.
Yeah, no, I never got it. I almost got one.
Do you want one?
I'll always try something once. I would have done it, but the thing was, I always said, if like they called an emergency count or got caught or anything, I didn't want it to be half finished and stuck with it on my arm. That was my biggest fear. But if there was like a guarantee that they can complete it in that time setting, I would have done it because it looks like pretty legit. I mean, when in the feds, they got real ink from outside. They use guitar strings for the needles and they sterilize it. Not giving anyone any ideas or anything.
Yeah, I live in the same building as him. Yeah.
Cool. Well, there's no more questions. It was great talking to you guys. Thank you again to the superintendent for inviting me here. This has been an absolute lovely time. And when you guys get out, if you need anything, I'm very active on my Instagram. Just Ian_Bick, so just slide in the DMs and get an interview happening. It's easier now with the blue check mark.
Do you ever get overwhelmed with people that reach out to you on there?
Yeah, I just try to send them to the website or my email or my assistant to kind of just, make it easier.
All right, this is not an encore. Office. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Big day, big day.
Thank you. Thank you.
My arms are tired. An hour and 10 minutes of holding that phone.
I asked you, Matt, if you needed a stand.
No, dude, everybody in the comments was like, how is he holding the phone for so long?
He's working hard. That was a lot of fun.
You guys remember Jasmine from the other night, huh?
Yeah.
How you doing?
My third time here in the city.
Oh, where was the first time?
Last year at.
All right. Yeah, I don't know if.
Oh, you went last year
She was
too?
in
That's how I met you.
Florida, right?
Yep, when we went to Pensacola. There's your second lunch.
Yeah.